Tonight on The Source. Are the lefties ready for this bombshell? Sit right where you are as we expose the environmental movement for what it really is, a scam.
I'm not going to discuss that.
Tonight we deliver the straight talk, and it's simple. 1, they do not know what they're talking about.
Whatever.
2, they're getting paid to protest.
We'd like to invite everybody to join us in courtroom 300 today.
And 3, they really, really hate me.
There's no point in talking to you.
Don't miss this expose. You're watching The Source. Hello, it's great to be back, and I've got a doozy of a story for you today. I went to Hamilton yesterday to follow up on a story I've been talking about for 2 months. Remember in June when 20 or so environmental lobbyists, G20 anarchist rioters, Occupy Wall Street types, and I don't know more protesters broke into an oil pipeline pumping station in the small town of Westover, Ontario. They kicked out the workers there and illegally occupied that pumping station for 6 days until police finally arrested them and kicked them out. I went out to Westover in June, the day the police cleared these trespassers out. I spoke to some of the local citizens of Westover who were terrified by these trespassers and deeply worried about the Mohawk warrior flags they were flying. Could this be another Oka or Caledonia? I spoke with some of the organizers of the protest itself that resulted in several protesters being charged, although the organizers themselves were not arrested that day. Here, remember this?
Yeah.
So how far away is that from here?
35 minutes.
Was there a rule that we weren't going to be talking to this?
Oh, is there a rule that, are you telling Floyd that he can't talk to anybody?
Well, I mean, Floyd can talk to whoever Floyd wants to talk to.
Okay, do you want to talk to me, Floyd?
No, I'll listen to her. I'll listen to her.
Okay, does she tell you what to do?
Yeah.
So she's sort of colonizing your
I'm not the
mind.
spokesman here. I'm just a supporter. So I'll listen to what they got to say.
How do you feel about a young white girl telling an Aboriginal man he can't speak?
I think I might be a little darker than Floyd.
No.
How do you know that I'm not Aboriginal?
No, I don't think I'll talk anymore. I'll listen to Alicia here.
Okay, she's your new colonizer. That white woman telling the Aboriginal elder to shut up was Alicia Patron, a staff member of an environmental lobby group called Environmental Defense, who was one of the organizers of the occupation. You can see she was a bit of a boss, telling other people what to do, which is bizarre and outrageous, given that Environmental Defense, the company that employs her, has charitable tax status from Revenue Canada. So a bunch of those trespassers who were arrested back in June had a court date yesterday in Hamilton, and they announced they weren't going to go quietly. They were going to have a big rally and march through the streets of Hamilton yesterday before going to the court. So naturally, I thought I'd join them with a couple of cameras in tow. I'm going to show you some of the film footage we took yesterday. It's fascinating, not because it was that interesting a protest. It was fairly boring at first glance. But on second glance and third glance, I think I've cracked the code. I think going out there helped me finally understand what's going on in Canada with the anti-oil sands and anti-pipeline protests and other protests too, from Occupy Toronto to I Don't Know More to even the anti-GMO food protests. It all sort of clicked just by going out there and hanging out with them for a couple hours and walking with them and listening to them and talking to them, because I think I got to know them a little bit. I have 3 simple conclusions that I've come to. I know they sound really simple once you hear them, but until you can figure it out, they're elusive. At least they were for me. Yesterday was my aha moment when all the puzzle pieces finally fit. Here, let me show you. I figured out 3 things. The first is this. Environmental protesters know very little about the environment, very little about the oil sands or pipelines or energy in Canada or really science at all. And what they claim they know is often false. These aren't experts, they're know-nothings. No, that's not even true. They know less than nothing. They're actually making the world a dumber place, especially the reporters who regurgitate these protesters' claims. Here, let me prove to you this first point. I just walked up to this one protester, all friendly-like, and asked her a simple question about the pipeline she was protesting against. Remember, it's called Line 9. It's been in the ground since the 1970s, pumping oil without incident for nearly 40 years. Now, right now, OPEC oil is brought in by tanker ship and then pumped from the east to the west. And the pipeline company wants to switch that, to reverse the flow from west to east, to replace that OPEC conflict oil from Saudi Arabia and Algeria with Canadian ethical oil from Alberta. So there's oil in the pipeline right now. The company just wants to switch the country the oil is from. Anyways, Let me show you. These folks said they were worried about oil spills and human rights and things like that. So I put a simple question to her. Do you prefer the oil that's in the pipeline now, that OPEC oil coming in from OPEC tankers?
Yes, of course. It's sweet oil.
Pardon me? Do environmental protesters like oil if it's sweet? Oil, sweet oil just means it has less sulfur in it, less than 1%, like Alaska North Slope oil has, as in the oil that was in the Exxon Valdez. Now, do you think this protester even knows what she means by saying she likes sweet oil? Of course she likes sweet oil. Do you think she knows it's just as black and just as oily as sour oil? Oil would say 3% sulfur in it, like the oil science. Do you think she could even tell the difference? Or do you think she was just trying to come up with some phrase that made her sound smart for why she preferred Saudi oil in the Line 9 pipeline, but was out there protesting against Canadian oil instead? So I asked her about something that maybe she cared about more than the percentage of sulfur in the oil. That is, how much blood is in the oil. Aren't you worried about human rights in OPEC countries?
Well, I'm really concerned about human rights in the world, and
aren't Saudi Arabia and OPEC countries some of the worst human rights abusers? Like the way they treat women, they're sexist there.
Do you think that it doesn't exist here?
So you think that Canada and Saudi Arabia are morally the same when it comes to women?
I don't think that we're in a position to judge between the ethics of how women are treated.
Really? A protester who's condemning the morality of Canadian oil doesn't think she has the moral standing to condemn oil in a theocratic dictatorship that forces women to wear burqas, that doesn't allow women to drive, let alone vote, that makes it a crime to be raped. Seriously, that's the Sharia crime of adultery. If a man rapes you, you're guilty. And this protester doesn't think we can judge that because we're just as bad. And after all, Saudi oil has 2% less sulfur in it than oil sands oil, don't you know? Well, I wasn't done asking old hippies about their moral compasses, I'll tell you that. I wasn't done asking about science and economics and, you know, facts. Here, let me make it very, very simple. If you had two gas pumps to fill up your car, one was made in Canada oil and one was made in Saudi Arabia, which would you choose?
I would choose the air pump to fill up my bicycle tires.
Do you have a car?
I have a car.
And
I use it as little as possible.
And when you do use it, what do you fill? Would you fill it up with Saudi oil or Canadian oil?
I would try to find where we're getting the most safety, and again, look at the whole picture.
Like, how do you feel about how Saudi Arabia treats women and gays?
I'm not going to discuss that. You're looking at different questions. Thank you.
But, okay, nice to talk with you. She wants to look at the whole picture, don't you know? Which oil has the most safety? That's what she says she cares about, as if Saudi Arabia, a brutal dictatorship, has a consumer safety culture, an environmental safety culture. The oil company there, Saudi Aramco, is owned by the dictators, the royal family of Saudi Arabia. Do you think the royal family sues itself if there's an oil spill? Do you think the press in Saudi Arabia, owned by the royal family, do you think they conduct investigations into oil spills and environmental problems at the oil company owned by the same royal family? Do you really think they're safer or cleaner or greener than in our democracy with our independent courts and press? I'll tell you what's not safe in Saudi Arabia: being a woman, being gay, being a minority of any sort. No Jews allowed at all in the country, of course. But even other Muslim denominations, like the Shiites, are discriminated against by Sunni Saudi Arabia. No, it's not safe to be anyone in Saudi Arabia, unless you're a prince, I guess. Yeah, I think I know why she didn't want to answer my questions, because that's the question, isn't it? Most of these protesters drove to the protest in a car, burning gasoline made from oil. So they're buying their oil from somewhere. And we know what oil is in that pipeline right now: Saudi oil, Algerian oil, OPEC oil. And we know these protesters are fine with that. They're more than fine with that. They want to keep that. They desperately want to stop that OPEC conflict oil, that Sharia oil, that women-beating, gay-hanging oil from being replaced with Canadian ethical oil. They've never protested against that pipeline before until now. Don't you think they have to answer for that? I asked this friendly fellow, one of the organizers of the protest, named Mike. How do you feel about us importing oil from dictatorships like Saudi Arabia, then?
I think it's a bad thing. I think it's a bad thing to be using oil, period.
Well, how come you never protest outside the Saudi embassy, then?
Is there a Saudi embassy here in Hamilton?
No, but there's Saudi embassy in Ottawa, and there's Saudi and Algerian oil being coming into Canada.
I'm probably sure I've been to protests around those areas. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Outside the Saudi embassy? I bet you haven't.
I've been to Ottawa and protested a bunch of embassies there.
Do you even know where the Saudi embassy is? I don't think you've been there, Mike.
No, I don't think I have either.
Of course, Mike hasn't protested outside the Saudi embassy, but that's just something he'd do if he cared about human rights or women's rights or gay rights or minority rights. But how about his simple grasp of the facts of the pipeline of Line 9 that's pumping away every day right now, bringing oil from OPEC and shipping it into Canada? Does he even have a basic grasp of those facts? Well, see for yourself. There is Saudi oil in that pipe right now, and you've never protested.
How is there Saudi oil in the pipeline coming from? How is there Saudi oil in the pipeline?
Because we import Saudi and Algerian oil.
In Alberta? And
no, from the east.
From Alberta down here?
No, this. Okay, you don't know what's in the pipeline right now?
We're talking about the stuff that's coming down from the Alberta tar sands.
Yeah, but it's not in the pipeline right now.
The stuff from the Alberta tar sands isn't in the pipeline right now.
No, you don't know that?
It's coming from the pipeline. They're going to do the reversal on it, and that's when they're going to ship the bitumen and all that stuff down there. That's what we're fighting.
That's right.
Reversal.
Dear viewer, that's Mike Roy. I'll introduce you to him a bit better later on. He's a senior organizer of this protest. He's one of the leaders of the event. And I don't think he has the foggiest clue about the pipeline at all. Do you? He doesn't know that it's been pumping for decades, pumping imported OPEC oil. He didn't know that there's oil from Algeria or Saudi Arabia in it. He said, and I quote, "The stuff from the Alberta tar sands isn't in the pipeline right now." He said that to me. What's he even protesting? If he thinks there's oil sands in the pipe right now, why does he think the company wants to reverse it to put oil sands oil in it? Has he even thought about this or read about this for even a minute? Is he not making the world a dumber place? Here, I did a little bit of education because I'm a teacher and I love the wayward souls and I want to save them. Look. Right, but right now it's importing oil from OPEC tankers from Saudi Arabia and Algeria. You didn't know that?
I did know that.
So you know there's OPEC oil in that pipe right now?
I think the biggest concern, none of us like the pipeline to begin with.
Well, why didn't you ever protest it before?
We have.
But when?
A long time ago.
Liar.
Whatever. Okay.
You told me earlier today you've never protested
I've never been to a Saudi Arabian embassy. No.
Because you don't give a damn.
I'd give it way more damn than you do.
You've never protested the Saudis, not once. I have.
What I'm trying to do is...
Why have you never protested the Saudis? You don't give a about people in foreign countries who live under dictatorships because you don't make money that way, do you?
I don't seem to remember you being at the Egyptian rally when the Egyptian revolution was starting or any of these other rallies.
See, you're evading my question. You love Saudi oil. Deny it.
I don't love any oil at all.
Well, you've never protested Saudi oil, have you?
I haven't personally, no.
No, of course not. No one here has ever protested Saudi oil.
You can't say that.
I absolutely can't. Tell me who has.
I don't know.
Yeah, and no one here. Oh, God, they made me mad. But I bet they put a big smile on the faces at the Saudi embassy to have such protesters doing OPEC's dirty work for them. Look, we all drive cars or take a bus or a plane or a boat or a motorcycle. We all use plastic, which is made from oil, all of us. And until we invent some fantasy fuel of the future, until we invent dilithium crystals or some magic pixie dust, it's either oil from Canada or oil from OPEC. Sorry, Switzerland doesn't make oil. Luxembourg doesn't make oil. And so by opposing Canadian ethical oil, by protesting against it, by definition, by process of elimination, these know-nothing protesters are supporting the status quo, importing Saudi oil, conflict oil, Sharia oil, dictatorship oil, whether or not they want to ignore my question, whether or not they're too stupid to understand what's in the pipe right now. One more interview with this friendly lady who had another theory about why Canadian oil was super bad.
It doesn't have the interior coating, which will prevent the corrosion from the sand. It doesn't have the exterior.
Is there sand in Dilbit?
Of course there is.
So it's
Ezra,
like,
you know there's sand.
Is there sand in what they're going to put in the pipeline?
Probably.
Probably or
Probably if it's bitumen, right?
Is bitumen and sand the same thing?
Ezra, are you trying to be cute?
No, I'm just... Now, we've all heard of the oil sands, and that's what it's like in the ground. It's like Mother Nature's giant oil spill tens of thousands of years ago, oil in sand. Now, for centuries, Aboriginals used to waterproof their canoes using the oil sands that literally oozed out of the ground. But it's sticky like peanut butter. And I think this lady believes that the oil sands companies just take that sandy, rocky, peanut butter consistency oil sands, who knows, maybe even with twigs and pine cones and the odd squirrel or old boot that gets scooped up, and sort of packs it in a pipe and just blasts it through a pipeline for 1,000 miles. She didn't mention the squirrel part, but she mentioned the sand. Yeah, no. How do I put this? They take the sand out first and they dilute it using something called dilbit. That's what they're doing out there in Alberta with all their machines and men. There are trace amounts of microscopic particles in the diluted bitumen dilbit that's shipped in pipes, that's been shipped in pipes in Canada successfully for 25 years now. There are trace amounts of particles in any oil. It's regulated. They have to be minuscule, microscopic in size and quantity. I think this sandy oil lady ought to get together with that sweet oil lady, plus the guy who isn't sure what oil is in the pipe now at all, sweet and sour maybe, I don't know, he doesn't know. And I think they all ought to put on a class where they all share their knowledge with the world. Lord help us. They remind me of the 9/11 truthers who say things like, did you know that never in history has fire melted steel? 9/11 was an inside job. Yeah, nah. But there's a little bit of trutherism here, too. Listen to her.
I would prefer that we advance our technology. It's already there. We're being prevented from using it.
Who's preventing us from using it?
Who do you think, Ezra?
I have no idea.
Come on, you're the showman for that.
I don't know who's preventing us from using it.
You don't think big oil's preventing us from using technology we currently have?
I don't know.
Come on, Ezra. Give your head a shake. You know. You know full well.
Well, I don't know. I genuinely want to know what you think.
You're hilarious. You know that we're being prevented from using the technology. The oil companies snatch up the technology, they buy the patents, then they squash it.
You know, I love her spunk. I'm not sure who she thinks killed the electric car, and I'm not sure why she wouldn't tell me exactly who she meant. Was she worried if she shared her secret knowledge with me that I'd get in trouble maybe? Or is it like Voldemort in Harry Potter where you're not supposed to even mention the bad guy's name? I don't know. Okay, will you agree with me that these are what we call low information protesters? Okay, well, if they know so little, why do they come across as caring so much? Are they real, or are they just really good actors? I think you know where I'm going with this right after the break. So we agree that these protesters really don't know a lot about oil or pipelines or Saudi Arabia or really anything. Well, if they know so little about oil and pipelines and where it comes from, if they think in such a shallow way about it that they don't even realize how much oil and energy they use every day, well, why are they protesting? I mean, how can you know so little but care so much, care enough to come and protest and scream and shout? In the case of many of them, even trespass and do other things that get you charged with crimes. I mean, if you knew so little about something, would you care so much that you'd get arrested for it? Well, that was my second epiphany. The reason they know so little but are so stubborn is because so many of them are professional activists, serial activists, who move from issue to issue, protest to protest, even from city to city, a different cause every week, sometimes a new cause every day. They don't know a lot about oil or the environment or whatever tomorrow's topic is. What they truly know about and care about is their tactics. Protests, anarchy, taunting police, and in even some cases, riots. That is, most of them aren't normal people who study an issue and become concerned and slowly study more and more and get worried and get their neighbors and friends involved until a local problem is solved. The opposite. These are protesters of fortune, opportunists who flit from cause to cause, rally to rally, not to solve a problem, but to wage a permanent war against our culture, especially against our economic system, using any issue as an excuse du jour to be abandoned in favor of tomorrow's flavor of the day. They don't know anything about oil because that's not important to them. All that's important is that they know being anti-oil fits in with their radical counterculture, fight the power, stick it to the man philosophy. They have a general sense that being anti-oil is what good leftists should do, which is ironic because they're actually supporting the theocratic fascist country of Saudi Arabia, which is why they hate those questions about OPEC, don't you think? So now let me use footage to prove to you my second thesis, that these are not normal people. They're professionals. You could almost call them actors, just playing a role, playing for the cameras. I mean, take this woman. I recognized her right away.
Where'd you get your protest sign from?
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Now that was Trish Mills. I know that because I've seen her before. Remember this? She was the girl who literally took a bicycle walk and locked her neck to the Line 9 pumping station at that break-in back in June. The cops had to cut her out. But Trish has more talents than locking her neck to a fence. Just the other day, here in Toronto, she was part of the anti-police protest in the wake of the shooting of Sammy Yatim, that young man who approached some young girls on a streetcar, holding his exposed penis in one hand and a knife in the other, obviously being shot dead by police is a subject worth investigating. But to Trish, it was an opportunity to fight the power. You know, oil pipeline, police shooting, whatever. It's the counterculture that matters. So she joined the Toronto rally and marched up to the police station and wrote, "Cops, pigs, murderers" on the wall of the police station. And she was arrested and released. And now she's back in Hamilton with a sign designed by that charity I mentioned before, Environmental Defense. Okay, that's Trish. But do you see this guy?
And I think we all recognize the totally perverse irony of the fact that 13 of us, or 18 of us, got arrested that day in Westover, while Enbridge continues to destroy communities, to destroy environments, and to commit their flagrant crimes every day without ever having to do what we're doing today.
That's Dave Prichitka. He was one of the folks arrested at the Line 9 break-in back in June. Here he is standing with that girl, Alicia Patron, the one who told that native elder to shut up. Prichitka was charged with rioting at the G20 summit in Toronto back in 2010, the one that left police cars torched, windows smashed, and Toronto's reputation blackened a bit. He was charged, but the charges against him were later dropped. But he didn't drop his grudge against society. He's moved from the G20 riots to anti-oil sands trespass, and he's brought other G20 riders along with him, including Alex Hundert, who was sentenced to more than a year in prison for those G20 riots. I wondered about that. Is it a good idea to have a rioter as a key organizer for the environmental movement?
Is that you, Dave?
If you'd like to continue the interview, I'm sure we can move somewhere else.
Yeah. Hey, Dave, have you been charged with criminal proceedings? Are you going to plead guilty? Dave, how many G20 anarchists are here today? Dave, are you the proud face of the environmental movement?
Dave Prichitka, G20 rioter, accused Line 9 trespasser, is a spokesman for this group of criminal accused. You saw him talking to another reporter there, but why did he run away when I asked him questions about his past conduct? Well, I'll tell you why later. But for now, my point is that these people aren't real. They're not even from Hamilton. Here, look, this girl, Bailey Lamont, she told me she's from London, Ontario.
Why are you here today?
You know what? I've actually been respectfully asked not to talk to you, so I'm just going to respect what people are thinking here.
Yeah, we talked for a bit about my standard question yesterday, why she pretends to oppose oil when she's actually just tickety-boo with OPEC oil. That's a swear that she bleeped out. Yes, same as the others, clueless. But who is this Bailey? Well, she's a professional anarchist protester. She shares an apartment with Mike, the guy with the Red Star earrings who's confused about what oil is in the pipeline right now. In fact, the two of them got arrested together recently in London for vandalism. Now, I'd go so far as to call it a hobby for Mike. Here he is, tampering with train tracks at a blockade and bragging about it on a video that he uploaded to the internet himself. Look.
All right. Ready? All right, so here's a little trick that my friends taught me here. If you want to get the tracks lights going, just go like this.
Now, Bailey is dating a guy named Dan, who was at the protest too. He's not from Hamilton either, like most of the other organizers. Dan is a very talented man. Here's his homemade song about Sun News and me.
Sun News represents Ezra Levant. Pierre Carl Pelledo is full of shit.
Oh man, that's going to be a great campfire classic, don't you think? Anyways, Dan, his name's Dan Baudouin. He has a sense of drama. Here are the pictures he chose for his profile page on Facebook. Guns, Molotov cocktail bombs, masks covering his face, a little bit of anti-Sun hatred too, and a lot of tattoos. I asked him about those tattoos when I met him. I see you have hate on one set of knuckles, is love on the other? Well, I'm glad to hear it.
Yes, the hate is for Sun News here.
So that's Bailey's fiance. So Bailey, Mike, and the hateful Dan Baudouin are part of a group that they call themselves the Indignants, which is pretty accurately named, I think. They're professional protesters about anything and everything, really. Bailey protests against Monsanto and genetically modified food. Here's Bailey at a political event where she participated in a rendition of the vagina monologues. And here she is in front of a McDonald's, thankfully not doing that vagina thing outside a restaurant. Do you get the feeling that Bailey and Dan and Mike are mad a lot at a lot of things, maybe even mad at everything? Yeah, my spider senses are tingling too. Here's Bailey's Twitter feed, joking about making Molotov cocktails. I think she's joking, right? Just like Dan was joking with his picture of the Molotov cocktail, right? Here's another tweet Bailey was talking about you. I'll read it. Happy Canada Day. Yay for colonialism, deceit, and theft through displacement and genocide of Indigenous humans. Blame Canada. F the flag. Having got to know her a little bit, I'm pretty sure that one's not a joke. I do believe that she really does hate Canada and what it stands for. So who else did we see at the protest yesterday? Well, this guy, Jeff Hanks. Hanks hangs out with Bailey a lot. I mean, that's them at another anti-oil protest back in May, and that's them together at an Idle No More bridge blockade a few months ago in Sarnia. And Hanks actually drove all the way to Ottawa to testify against the Sun News Network getting an improved TV license at the CRTC. Are you starting to get a picture of these folks? Professional protesters, Idle No More, Occupy, anti-oil, block train tracks, anti-Sun, anti-everything pretty much. Hanks told me he's a nurse. I'm sure that's true. He sure gets a lot of days off, doesn't he? So who else was at the protest? Well, this guy, G20 anarchist, Peter Horton is his name, sentenced to 5.5 months in prison. So that's the roster of professionals, like actors in a theatrical production. So who is their dramatic director? Who did the casting call? Who produced this little street theater? I'll show you if you promise not to move a muscle in the meantime. These protesters, they're clueless, but they're professionals, old hands, a rent-a-mob. But every mob needs its ringleader. So who led these angry men? Well, a girl did, named Alicia Patron. She's the one who ran the show at the Line 9 break-in, telling people who could or couldn't talk, giving the official line to the media. Here she is running the thing with her good buddy, G20 rioter, Dave Prochitka. She's wearing a Stop Harper button, just in case you thought maybe she was a young Tory or something. Here's a clip of her telling our Brian Dunstan that he couldn't go on to the Line 9 pumping station to film it.
So we're going to take a walk down here just to talk to them.
We're asking you to be respectful of our... Can we have...
And we respectfully decline to not be stopped. I mean, that's not a legitimate sign. Someone wrote that.
Geez, telling Brian where he can and can't go, telling that native elder where he can or can't go. It's a bit creepy how she bosses around visible minorities, I think. So Alicia was running the show at the break-in at Westover in June, as you saw, and again yesterday in Hamilton. So Wednesday she was in Hamilton, yesterday. But where was she the day before, on Tuesday? Why, she was in Toronto at a press conference with Clayton Ruby. Ruby, a lawyer, was announcing that he was going to sue the federal government. He wants to change the rules that now govern who's allowed to appear as a witness before the National Energy Board for hearings on pipeline projects. Those rules now require one of two things: that you're either directly affected by the pipeline or that you have some sort of expertise, scientific or even Aboriginal or traditional knowledge, but you've got to have some standing. Now, this is a change from how it used to be when anyone in the world, seriously, foreign citizens, foreign companies, young kids, even fictitious characters could sign up to testify at a hearing to deliberately gum up a pipeline process. And remember these guys, the Dogwood Initiative out of BC, who had an official Mob the Mic campaign to sign up 1,600 people just to delay the Northern Gateway pipeline. A grand total of more than 4,000 people signed up, foreign citizens, fake names, anyone, just to slow down the process. Well, that was changed to only allow Canadians who will be affected by the pipelines to testify, or those who have an expertise. Now, Ruby is suing to go back to the old way. And who was there at the announcement of this lawsuit on Tuesday but, you guessed it, Alicia Patron. Here, take a look and listen.
Our federal government is corroding democracy, so I believe we must seek justice through the legal system. So I'm here today hoping the courts can correct this assault by our federal government on democracy and environmental rights and restore justice.
So let's get this straight. On Tuesday, Alicia Patron is part of a lawsuit going to court to ask them to allow literally anyone with no connection or knowledge about the pipeline to be able to come and testify, and also to talk about things unrelated to the pipeline, like the theory of man-made global warming or whatever. Patron and Ruby obviously lost that battle democratically. These changes were lawfully enacted by our elected government. So they're suing, and Patron is citing the rule of law and democracy and justice. So those were her values on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, well, there's Patron again, out on the streets of Hamilton with rioters like her buddy Prachitka, with convicted criminals like Peter Horton, with more than a dozen other protesters who were again charged. They were first charged with trespass and break and enter, an alleged crime spree that occurred at a protest she personally directed from the scene itself. And then there were actually more charges made in Hamilton yesterday, too. Patron's group of rogues disobeyed riot police on horseback and blocked downtown intersections and disrupted the court hearing itself. More arrests and charges were made yesterday. Really? Well, I tried to ask Patron about this contradiction.
Alicia,
And Sun News
how come you were at court yesterday, but now you're with the lawbreakers today?
How's your network going?
Were you one of the guys charged in the G20 riots? Alicia, don't you think it's ironic that you are suing in court, but you're here with lawbreakers?
Now, it's funny because Patron is obviously a media hound. Press releases, press conferences, videos, letter writing, everything. But she sure wanted to avoid my question, didn't she? Now, one of Patron's friends, Trish Mills, the one who bike-locked her neck to the fence, she told me that Patron had been fired from her job with that environmental lobby group called Environmental Defense. That's the group that provided the big posters that adorned the alleged crime scene of the break-in. That's the group that Patron helped run. Well, Trish Mills said that Patron was fired because of her involvement with the protest. Well, I'm skeptical, but I thought I'd check. Did Environmental Defense, which is charitable status with Revenue Canada, did they really fire Patron for her involvement with the events at Line 9? I tried to ask her.
Alicia, how come you're running away from me? Alicia, Trish says you were fired from Environmental Defense. Is that true? Alicia, Trish Mills says you were fired from Environmental Defense. Is that true?
Hey, Ezra, who paid for your cruise when you were having it?
Alicia, Trish says you were fired from Environmental Defense. Are you still working for Environmental Defense? Alicia, why won't you talk to us? Why are you afraid?
A great story.
Alicia, why were you in court yesterday, suing in court, but you're hanging out with criminals today? Alicia, were you fired from Environmental Defense? Why don't you answer? Why are you running away from my questions, Alicia? You can't hide from the truth, Alicia. Alicia, how come you're avoiding my question?
I live close to there, yeah.
Alicia, why won't you answer if you've been fired from Environmental Defense? Trish Mills said you were fired.
Yeah, I guess just shouting and screaming is the best they could do. They sure did try to get me to stop asking that question, didn't they? Look, these guys hate oil and pipelines and, well, Canada and cops, but they have a very special kind of hatred for me. I'll show you after these quick capitalist messages. My first point today was that these protesters know very little about oil or pipelines or the environment, and what they claim to know is often wrong. My second point is that the reason these protesters know so little is that they're not genuinely concerned about these issues. They're just on some sort of tour, bitching here, bitching there, blocking this railway track, blocking that bridge, vandalizing this, breaking in here or there. Really not much different from a gang, except for they justify their behavior by calling it politically motivated. That is, they're professional troublemakers, often from out of town. Those are my first two epiphanies, but my third is this. They hate the Sun News Network, and me in particular, because we expose that they know nothing, and we expose that they're professional protesters, unlike the rest of the media, that's either complicit with their agenda, or more often just too lazy to be skeptical and ask tough questions. That is, when the CBC shows up, Alicia Petrone and Dave Prichitka and the rest of the rabble are delighted to give them lengthy interviews, because environmental reporters at the CBC really aren't reporters. They're stenographers at best. They're environmental activists embedded within the media. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if Petrone herself winds up at the CBC. I mean, do you think other reporters even type the names of these activists into Google? And if they did, and if they saw, as I found in like 90 seconds online, the history of arrests and convictions and prison sentences, or even just the history of abusive language and glorification of guns and Molotov cocktails, do you think that the CBC would even report those facts? They pretend they never saw those facts, because that would ruin their official narrative of environmentalists being peaceful do-gooders, the little people, the Davids, versus the big corporate oil patch Goliaths. And in this case, with the oil pipeline company called Enbridge, that would break 3 CBC reporting rules as a 1, capitalist company, 2, shipping oil, 3, from Alberta. Well, that's 3 strikes. The CBC's DNA forbids them from reporting the facts if they show the anti-Enbridge protesters in an unkind light. Do you think I'm alone in this assessment? Do you think this is some sort of self-congratulation or vanity? That I think I'm a more skeptical and inquisitive reporter than the lapdogs deployed by the media party to the environmental file? Well, don't take my word from it. Take it from the protesters themselves. Here's Bailey Lamont explaining why she prefers the CBC and why her friends were tampering with our cameras.
But how come? How come?
I don't really have any desire to talk to you.
Well, you're talking to me right now. Just tell me why you won't talk to me at least.
Because I've been respectfully asked not to, because you guys twist our words.
Do you talk to other media?
Sometimes.
So do you prefer?
Because they don't twist what we're saying. They don't twist what we're saying and make us out to be something we're not.
She prefers other journalists. Of course she does. Because I checked the other media reports today, and they don't tell the world about Bailey's arrests and serial protests now, do they? Of course she prefers them. Or check out this guy. I was trying to have some fun with him, but he was not amused. And he told me why.
What's your name?
I'd rather not talk to a non-news organization. So thanks.
But I just feel attracted to you because of your glowing mane of hair. I just want to get you saying something. Why won't you talk to me? At least tell me that.
Because I've watched your newscasts and they're full of flaws and lies. That's why.
Well, what did I lie? Tell me, give me one thing and I'll correct it. But I want to.
No one here likes you. Why don't you go away? I don't want to give you information because you'll twist it and distort it, and there's no point in talking to you. So I'm not.
Prefer to talk to other journalists?
Yes.
You've got to admit that was a gorgeous head of hair. But I'm not his preferred journalist, am I? Because I'll distort his information. Now, how exactly would I do that? Would I dub my voice over his? Would I bleep out really smart things he would say? Look, they all agreed. The Sun was different from other media. We asked tougher questions. We weren't merely leftist repeaters of their propaganda. And anytime we asked tough questions, our cameras were quickly blocked and we were shouted down.
Hi, what's your name?
I'm not talking to the Sun TV.
How come?
Because you're right-wing.
You only talk to left-wingers?
You're right-wing. You twist the truth. You support the tar sand. You're opposed to labor. I don't think I have anything that I'd like to share with you.
Do you prefer talking to other journalists?
I just had to giggle with how childish they were. Do you think the CBC's cameras are ever blocked? Or their reporters ever shouted down by environmental extremists or G20 rioters or, I don't know, more radicals or Occupy types? Well, of course not. Why would they be mean to their allies? Look, we're not quite done yet. I am going to end this show on a light note, and it's something that you have to see to believe. Do not miss it.
Do you prefer the oil that's in the pipeline now, that OPEC oil coming in from OPEC tankers?
Yes, of course. It's sweet oil.
Oh, they love that sweet, sweet Saudi oil. Sweetened with the tears of millions of enslaved women, maybe, of stoned to death gays. I've never heard an environmentalist say they like oil before, but I guess if it's sweet, they like it. What a kook. Listen, let me end today's brief chat on a light note. No Molotov cocktails, no guns, no tattoos that say hate. But the three learnings, the three takeaways all at once. Number one, a know-nothing protester who knows less than zero. Number two, a professional protester who can be counted on to hold any sign, any poster for any leftist cause and, you know, whatever it is today. And number three, a reflexive distaste for the Sun News Network for daring to expose the first 2 points. Here, take a look at this beauty.
That's no thank you.
You don't want to talk at a rally?
Not to the Sun.
How come you don't want to talk to the Sun?
Well, because you know why.
Why?
No thank you.
Are we more critical than other media?
No thank you.
Will you talk to other reporters?
Yeah.
Is there any other reporter you won't talk to besides the Sun?
No.
Is it because I'm critical of the Line 9 protesters?
It's because Ezra, you know.
And what do you think of Ezra?
Well, he's connected with ethical oil, unethical oil.
And if you had one message to say to Ezra, what would it be?
No comment.
Do you think Ezra's going to show up today?
I have no idea. No idea.
What do you think Ezra looks like? Do you think he's ugly?
Does that matter what his appearance looks like?
He thinks he's ugly.
Well, then...
He's got a low body self-image.
Well, that's his issue.
Any last messages for Ezra if I see him?
No.
No? Okay, nice to meet you.
Oh my God, it was all I could do not to break out laughing. Hey, but at least she didn't shout at me or swear at me like some of the others. At least she was actually nice enough that she didn't chime in to say, yeah, Ezra's fat, when I practically invited her to make fun of me. Boy, I hope she gets a chance to talk to Ezra one day. That'll really be something. Look, my friends, Canada's environmental movement is fake. It's full of actors pretending to know something, but all they know are a few lines that they chant. They pretend to be normal folks next door, but they're shipped in, usually from Toronto. Most of the folks yesterday didn't live in Hamilton, just like none of the trespassers were from Westover. They're professional protesters, and lately, they're not just protesters, not just rich college kids like Alicia Patron. They're hardened professional criminals, rioters, convicts who have actually served time in prison. People who aren't known for their scientific knowledge or their political skills, people who are known for their willingness to smash things and even to attack police. And that's why they hate us at the Sun, because is there anyone else in Canadian TV or newspapers who would have told you what I told you today? Stick around, my final thoughts after the break. Well, what do you think of that? You know what I think. I've never talked the entire show through. We had a guest scheduled. Sorry, I talked out the clock, but I want to hear from you. What do you think of the fact that you have professional protesters know nothing about the cause, use violence when they need to? Let me know on Twitter. Ezra Levant's my Twitter address. Send me an email. thesource@sunmedia.ca. You know who else you should send an email to? Stephen Harper, pm@pm.gc.ca. How do you feel about these kind of protests? And how do you feel about these groups having charitable status? You tell Stephen Harper to fix this. If he won't, who will? Good night, everybody.